pioneers. Amazon and Microsoft have piled on. But really, over the last 20 years, surveillance capitalism, it first became the default economic model in the tech sector. But now we see it moving through the normal economy. You know, whether you look at insurance, education, healthcare, retail, real estate, even right back into manufacturing and basic services, we're seeing companies all over the economy now chasing what they perceive to be as that magical surveillance dividend. You know, how you get those margins in a world of intense global competition.
And when you say that magical surveillance dividend, are you talking about basically our innermost thoughts, you know, as much information about how we tick, what makes us tick as possible?
Well, so here's how surveillance capitalism works, just in brief. You know, it begins with these companies claiming, unilaterally claiming, our private human experience as their free source of raw material. So what do they do with that raw material? They lift out of it the rich predictive signals in our behavior, and they turn that into data. These behavioral data, you can think of it as a complex set of pipes, supply chains. So the behavioral data now is scraped from our experience, it goes into the supply chains, then it gets tipped onto the conveyor belts and right into the new factories. What happens in those factories? Well, that's where we talk about things like artificial intelligence, machine intelligence. The new factories are computational.
But give us a practical example of how that data is being harvested and then how is it being used in order to, let's say, make us buy certain things that we might actually not want to buy.
Absolutely. So what comes out the other end of the factory? Well, we always know factories make products. So what's coming out of these factories are products that predict our behavior. They are computational products that predict what we will do soon and later. And they're not, even though they are about us, they're not for us. They're not sold to us. They're not meant to enhance our own lives. They're sold to business customers who want a leg up on what we're going to do in the future. So here's an example. We know that, for example, right now in London, there's a lot of discussion about the CCTV cameras everywhere who are taking everybody's faces without their knowledge, therefore without their permission and so on. And there's a lot of controversy about this. But what everyone needs to know is that the tech companies, the private sphere, has fought for the right to take our faces from any kind of public space, to take our faces off the web.
Have they got that right?
They have, well, certainly in the US, they have that right. They have unilaterally claimed the right. And no government in the US, all during the years of the Obama administration, and since then, no government has obstructed that right. So anywhere that you are in a public space, certainly in the US, the tech companies can take your face. Why do they want your face so badly? Well, first of all, obviously, it's very important to know who's doing what and where they're going and where they are and so forth. But there are even deeper reasons. There are many, many muscles in the face, and those muscles can combine into hundreds of different kinds of gestures. They do facial recognition analysis to compute those gestures because those gestures predict emotion. And once they know what you're feeling, that becomes one of the most powerful predictors of your behavior. Now, that kind of behavioral insight is sold to business customers. So, for example, we know about a Facebook document that was leaked to the press in Australia, written by Facebook executives to their Australian and New Zealand business customers. And what do they sell them in this document? They say, we have so much detailed data on behavior and emotion from 6.4 million young, teenage, and young adult people who live in New Zealand and Australia. And through this intense depth and range of data, we know their emotional cycles through every day and through the week.
But is that actually true, or is that just a boast?
Well, it appears to be true. I mean, someday we'll get into Facebook and we'll do the forensics, and because we'll have the law to allow us to do that. Right now, from everything we know and everything we can triangulate, it appears to be true because it dovetails with the findings of researchers who have, academic researchers indeed, who have been developing these very capabilities literally since the year 2008, 2009, 2010, where these kinds of data capture, data analysis translating into emotional and behavioral insights that predict future behavior. We know that these capabilities exist and have been proven.
So this facial recognition technology that you talk about goes way beyond what Cambridge Analytica was trying to do, for instance, doesn't it?
Well, Cambridge Analytica was, as you know, a small firm. We're still trying to figure out exactly what it did do. But even those things we know, what it suggests is that this little firm was a parasite, and it was the parasite on a much larger host. Face value, it looks like that much larger host was Facebook. But what we know is that Facebook is a pioneer surveillance capitalist. Essentially, 97% of Facebook's revenues come from its online targeted advertising markets, which are wholly owned and operated in this surveillance capitalist economic logic. So Cambridge Analytica is a parasite on the host of surveillance capitalism. All of its mechanisms and methods, all of its data, all derive from surveillance capitalism, simply pivoting those operations a few degrees from trying to acquire guaranteed commercial outcomes, achieving guaranteed commercial outcomes for business customers, to instead trying to achieve guaranteed political outcomes for a political customer, if you will, in this case, a secretive software billionaire who owned that company and was using it to manipulate the public for his political aims.
So it's the same business model, but one is about getting you to buy stuff and the other one is about getting you to vote in a certain direction.
To vote in a certain way, to think in a certain way, to align yourself with certain groups, to read certain kinds of materials, and yes, ultimately, in order to add momentum to a political point of view, to the point of actually voting.
Isn't the success of surveillance capitalism also that we are the willing accomplices? We want to be able to go online. We don't mind having Netflix or Amazon predict what we want to buy because they can glean our tastes. Isn't that the case?
Well,
it's convenient for us.
Yes, there's so many pieces to this. So let me just say a couple of things. I feel very loving and generous toward us. When I ask the question—
That's good to know.
When I ask the question, how did they get away with it? I come up with 16 answers. And I won't try to go through all the 16. Some are historical, structural, but some have to do with how we have been bamboozled and exploited, all right? You mentioned the word convenience. Look, we've all lived through the last 4 to 5 decades of real economic oppression, growing income inequality. Family incomes have not really moved since the 1970s. We're all under tremendous pressure. Everybody in the family is working. A lot of people are working more than one job. So the time pressure and the stress in our families is enormous as a result of the economic policies of these past decades. So do we need convenience? You bet we do. Do we need ways to save time and help ourselves and help our families? You bet we do. So these needs are being exploited. So that's number one. Number two is these companies that we're talking about, as you know, have become very wealthy companies, literally the wealthiest companies in the history of commerce. So a lot of this capital, this private surveillance capital, has gone to work creating systems that are intentionally hidden from us, that are designed to keep us in ignorance. Ergo,
Give me an
surveillance
example.
capitalism.
Oh.
Well, really from the start, I'm talking about these rich predictive signals. We live in the illusion that we are making a private calculation. I'll give Facebook or Google or Amazon this little bit of data, and in return, I get this service, which is very useful. Often it's even free. So that seems like a private calculation that's worth making. What we don't understand, two things. One is that we think we know what we're giving them, but it's not the case. They are taking so much from what we give them that we have no idea about. For example, you're making plans on Facebook for your family and friends to have dinner this evening. They don't care about what you write. They care about, do you use exclamation points? Do you use bullet points? When you make plans.
Why? Why do they care about that?
Because those are the predictive signals. Analysts have shown that you can take these kinds of signals, whether you say, for example, I'll see you later, or I'll see you at 7:45 at the corner of Oxford and Regent Street. Do I have that right? These are indications
Of the kind of personality that you have.
Translated into what's called the 5-factor personality test. And with that personality test, other kinds of things can be inferred. Your sexual orientation, your political orientation, all kinds of things about yourself that you never intended to disclose. And these kinds of predictive signals are being hunted and captured not only all over the internet and the trail that you've left online, but now throughout the real world. Where are you? Where are you going? What apps do you have on your phone? Those apps can be capturing not only your location on a constant basis, but your contacts, your messages. Some of them capture your phone, some of them, your camera, some of them capture your microphone.
But if my kids have all got these supercomputers,
In their pockets.
in their pockets, in their hands, constantly on them. If I told them what you've just told me, that the price for having this is that your information, your most personal information, is being put together by someone like a puzzle, and they know all about you. That's the price. Or you give this thing up and you use a landline and you just read books. I think they'd probably go for the former. They'd say, okay, if that's the price of having the supercomputer in my hands, I'll live with it. And this gets back to the earlier question. We are accomplices in this. We are willing accomplices, which is great for the business model of these tech giants, but also means that we are quite happy to hand over all this data. In the battle between convenience and privacy, convenience seems to be winning.
Well, again, let me emphasize, it does seem to be winning, but there are other reasons for this. One is that most of us have almost no understanding of what is going on backstage. These operations are deeply designed to be hidden from us. That's one reason why I spent so many years writing this book, Matt, because I wanted to be able to at least lift the veil on a good deal of this information so that we have an idea of what these backstage operations really are. And a second thing is that over the 20 years since surveillance capitalism was invented early in the 2000s and has now disseminated through the economy, this logic has had a free run.
Virtually no regulation.
Unimpeded by law, Matt, unimpeded by regulation. What that
Why
means,
is that, by the way, do you think?
Well, let me just finish this thought and I'll come back to that. What that means is that it has disseminated through so many sectors so that our alternatives have largely been foreclosed. It used to be that surveillance capitalism owned and operated just a piece of the internet. But now surveillance capitalism owns and operates virtually everything we do on the internet. Every interface with a, quote, smart product or a personalized service. We have that computer in our pocket. So anywhere we are and any app that we're interacting with, even now, driving in our cars, the smart dashboard, being in our homes, with Internet of Things, smart appliances, smart television, smart refrigerator. All of these things are saturating us and surrounding us, the devices and cameras in the streets, so that we are increasingly trapped in a world of no escape. And even if we want to make a choice, we can't.
That was going to be our next question. You know, if are there only two choices here? You're either completely, you know, entrapped in that ecosystem of information, of surveillance, or you're completely outside it. You know, like living in the forest. Is there something in between? I mean, can I choose to be part of it up to a point and, you know, ignore the rest?
Well, all right. So, you know, a lot of people put time into what I call hiding in our own lives, right? So there are massive discussions about encryption and all the kinds of attachments that you can put on your browser that eliminate the trackers and that disguise your location. And so
do they work?
Well, some of them work, and they work for a time. And you know what I was just about to say, this is an arms race. So we try to hide, and they try to find us, and then we find new ways of hiding, they find new ways of finding us. But the real answer here, Matt, is that this is intolerable. This is unacceptable, because we are 21st century citizens. We have been duped into thinking that privacy is a private matter. And that's where your child, you know, feels that he or she can make this private calculation. Well, Dad, you know, I'm willing to give up this information because otherwise I really can't live an effective life with my friends, with my school, with any of the work I have to do. The answer to that is privacy is not private. Privacy is social, it is societal, and it is a collective action problem, not an individual problem. How do we solve collective action problems? Matt, we solve them with law. We solve them with democracy. So there is one thing that surveillance capitalists fear. It may not be me as an individual or you as an individual or your son or daughter as an individual. But what they fear is all of us mobilized together now, switched on, with our eyes wide open, no longer prey to this bamboozlation that they've become so good at.
We saw a little bit of that, didn't we, with
years.
Facebook and their share price after the Cambridge Analytica scandal?
We saw a little bit of it, and now we see, you know, this next phase of bamboozlement. Interesting story. Mark Zuckerberg in April of 2019 is up on the stage announcing to his people, privacy is the future. Right? So all of us, our heads are kind of cracking because, you know, how do we make sense of this strange moment? But then just a month later in June, Facebook's counsel is arguing in a California courtroom where a group of people have brought a class action suit. And the idea of this suit is we want to know from Facebook, what is our Facebook data that was shared with Cambridge Analytica that allowed them to target us for political ends, for pernicious political goals? We want those data. And the Facebook counsel is arguing to the judge that anyone who goes on Facebook, likely to be sharing with at least 100 people in a network, has no reasonable expectation of privacy. If you participate in Facebook, you have no reasonable expectation of privacy, and therefore you have no standing in a courtroom arguing for privacy. How about that? So if you are vulnerable to bamboozlement, friends, we need to dig deeper, we need to read widely, and we need to understand that this rhetoric of misdirection and obfuscation and making things hidden and indecipherable has been one of their key sources of advantage from the very start. Very few of us have that capability of looking at other folks with a straight face and just saying something that is not true and not flinching. But
they know much
learned
more
how to
about
do
us.
that.
They know much more.
Good evening, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, based on your time zone. I welcome you to our ongoing class on data ethics and Governance, CSIS 502. I can see quite a lot of us in class. Okello, Queen, Samuel Roland, Sophia, Josias, Elizabeth, AY, Rachel, Akintoye, Irinosa. Wow, we are going to have quite an interesting time today. Before we proceed to what we have to